Imagine, if you will, a massive nationwide tour just rolling across the country.
Right, like the kind with packed daily schedules.
Exactly. You've got cross-country travel through mountains, cities, a new venue every single day, and, crowds of people waiting to see the main event.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive rock tour.
It really does. But instead of rock stars stepping off some metaphorical tour bus to fill stadiums with, I don't know, giant amplifiers and pyrotechnics, the headliners are, well, permaculture experts.
Permaculture experts, community mediators, ecological innovators.
Right. And instead of guitars, they are carrying actual blueprints for sustainable living and social regeneration.
It is quite the visual, honestly.
Yeah.
You're basically swapping out the light shows for, like, solar panels and bioconstruction workshops.
Yeah.
But what really stands out when you actually look at the logistics is that the energy, the ambition, and just the sheer organizational muscle required for this tour. I mean, it was remarkably similar to a major concert circuit.
Okay, let's unpack this, because
Yeah.
that is exactly why we are jumping straight into this today.
For sure.
We've managed to get our hands on the official English report for a truly massive undertaking. It was called Tour 2026 Transition in Motion Colombia.
Right, and just to orient you if you're listening, this took place between January 7th and February 24th of 2026.
Yeah, and the organizing forces behind it were Change the World Colombia and Norway Transition Colombia.
A really interesting collaboration.
Absolutely. So if you are joining us today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore how this ambitious, highly professional, and shockingly entirely self-funded initiative managed to travel across more than 25 Colombian territories.
25 territories in what, like 6 weeks?
Yeah, barely 6 weeks. It's wild. We are going to look at the actual mechanics of how they approach these communities, the physical utopias they are trying to build, and I think most importantly, how they're trying to cross that massive chasm from local grassroots experiments into systemic national policy.
Because, I mean, building a single off-the-grid eco-house is one thing, right?
Right, it's a fun weekend project for some people.
Exactly. But building a political and social framework for an entire nation to transition toward ecological resilience, that is a vastly more complex beast.
Oh, for sure.
And what this source material reveals is essentially a mobile laboratory designed specifically to crack the code on that national transition.
And reading through the daily logs, it's clear this wasn't just some casual, idealistic road trip.
No, not at all.
Like a tour visiting eco-villages and circus camps might sound, I don't know, kind of idyllic on paper. But they were out there executing a highly organized strategy to tackle localized climate and cultural crises.
Via targeted work.
Right. But you can't just roll into a town with a truckload of solar panels, drop them off, and expect a utopian society to just spring up overnight. So how did they actually approach these communities to ensure the work would, stick?
Well, they utilized a very specific, deeply methodological framework. They call it the community compass. Yeah. And it's designed to address the fact that just dropping off technology without preparing the social fabric is just a recipe for failure.
Makes sense.
So the compass methodology seeks to synchronize 3 distinct elements within a community. Those are the head, the heart, and the hands.
Okay, let's break those down. What is the actual function of the head in this context? Like, what does that look like on the ground?
The head is really about intellectual clarity. It's about understanding reality.
Okay.
It's the community's grasp of their local climate data, the economic pressures of their specific region, and, the strategic planning and technical knowledge required to actually survive and adapt.
So it's the blueprints, the math, the logic.
Precisely. It's the data. Then you move on to the heart, which focuses entirely on human connections, values, and emotional resilience.
Ah, the messy stuff.
The very messy stuff. It is the social fabric of the community. And finally, the hands represent the physical transition from all that planning and feeling into concrete physical action.
So the literal labor.
Yeah, the labor of building, planting, regenerating the land.
I see. It's kind of like, okay, think about trying to build a house, right?
Do it.
You need the blueprints. That's the head. You need the actual hammers and nails. Those are your hands. But you also need the desire and trust of the people who are going to live in that house together. That's the heart.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because if the people living there hate each other, it doesn't matter how well built the house is, it's going to be a miserable place to live.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that if we look at the historical data on intentional communities, eco-villages, sustainability initiatives, we find a very consistent, honestly, often surprising pattern.
What's that?
They rarely fail. because of bad technology.
Really?
Yeah. They do not collapse because the bioconstruction materials were fundamentally flawed or, the renewable energy grid failed. They almost always fail because of human conflict.
Wait, really? So interpersonal drama is a bigger threat to an eco-village than, like, a drought?
Absolutely. Unresolved interpersonal dynamics, power struggles, a lack of trust, poor decision-making structures, all of that will rot a sustainability project from the inside out.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, and the facilitating team behind the 2026 tour understood this deeply. You cannot just teach a community how to filter their gray water and then walk away.
Right, because who maintains the filter when two families are fighting over it?
Exactly. You have to teach them conflict resolution, participatory governance, and active listening right alongside the appropriate technologies. Because if the heart of the project is broken, the hands will inevitably stop working.
That completely reframes the entire concept of ecological transition for me. Like, we are so conditioned to view climate resilience as a purely scientific hurdle.
Oh, for sure. It's always about the tech.
Yeah, it's always carbon capture algorithms, advanced battery storage, optimizing the grid. But you're saying the messy, unpredictable reality of human relationships is actually the primary bottleneck.
It is the ultimate bottleneck. And if you track the daily itinerary of this tour, you see them running straight into that messy human element rather than avoiding it.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of that in the field then, because I really want to understand what this looks like when it's not just theory in a report.
Sure.
Like, the report details a stop on January 21st in Cali. This was at the Aguacatal eco neighborhood.
Right, Paco.
The tour team arrives, but they don't immediately start planting community gardens or whatever. The report notes they conducted a, quote, mediation process to manage internal tension and build trust.
Yes.
And then, a few weeks later, on February 8th, they visit the Apachin Casa de Niebla school in Cachipe, Cundinamarca. And again, they aren't out there building a greenhouse. They are facilitating a collective decision-making process with the local parents using active listening tools.
Right, these are prime examples of applying that heart methodology to secure the long-term survival of the project.
But let me push back on this just a little because the logistics here seem incredibly tight.
They were very tight.
Right. You have a highly ambitious team trying to hit 25 territories in roughly 6 weeks. They have extremely limited time at each stop.
Yeah, usually just a day or two.
So isn't it a massive drain on resources to spend those precious hours essentially playing group therapy referee for a neighborhood feud or running a PTA meeting? Like, shouldn't they prioritize setting up the physical infrastructure?
It is a common critique, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And from a purely, engineering mindset, it does look inefficient.
Yeah, it looks like a distraction.
But the findings of this tour, and honestly the broader transition movement as a whole, argue the exact opposite. Mediation is not a distraction from the ecological work. It is the absolute prerequisite for it.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of why that is.
Well, think about the immense level of daily cooperation required to run a place like the Aguacatal eco-neighborhood.
Okay.
The residents are sharing limited resources, they are managing waste collectively, they are making joint decisions about land use and water rights.
Right, they're basically running a mini municipality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that requires a hyper-functional governance structure. If there's a faction within that neighborhood that feels ignored, or, if two prominent families just refuse to speak to one another, the collective maintenance of the ecological projects will stall.
Because nobody can agree on whose turn it is to fix the solar array?
Precisely. The report explicitly concludes that community life absolutely requires human-centered methodologies to thrive. If you bypass the mediation, you are just building a beautiful, sustainable monument that will collapse under the weight of internal division within a year.
Okay, that makes complete sense when you put it like that. The social infrastructure has to be as resilient as the physical infrastructure.
Exactly.
So assuming they've done that hard work, they've mediated the disputes, the community trust is solid, what happens when they finally pick up the hammers? Like, what does a socially healed community actually build?
Well, this is where we get into the hands aspect of the compass. And this is really where the tour highlighted the sheer diversity of what regeneration looks like in Colombia.
Yeah, the report made it clear it is not a one-size-fits-all model.
Not at all.
The locations they visited sound incredible, honestly. For instance, they spent time at Salanagua, located in the Arenal River Basin in Antioquia. The source material describes it as a center integrating clean production, renewable energy, and bioconstruction.
Yes.
And then they traveled to Villa Mejia in Sylvania, which is recognized as Colombia's first ecological village designed entirely with permaculture principles.
Okay, let's pause on those terms for a moment because they are crucial to understanding the physical work being done here.
Sure.
When the report talks about bioconstruction, it is referring to the practice of building infrastructure using locally sourced natural materials.
So not just going to the hardware store.
Right, we're talking about bamboo, rammed earth, straw bale. It is about creating structures that have a minimal carbon footprint and that blend seamlessly with the local environment rather than, importing tons of concrete and steel.
And what about permaculture? We hear that buzzword thrown around a lot, but how does it actually apply to a place like Villa Mejia?
Permaculture is essentially a design philosophy.
Okay.
Rather than forcing the land to adapt to human needs through chemical fertilizers and intensive plowing, permaculture designs human settlements in agriculture to mimic the natural resilience and relationships found in a local ecosystem.
So working with nature instead of against it.
Exactly. It's about creating closed-loop systems where the waste from one process becomes the fertilizer for another. Villa Mejia was built from the ground up using these principles.
It sounds incredibly serene, like a very peaceful way to live. But then the tour visits a place that completely shatters that quiet pastoral image.
Oh, yeah.
Ecocirco in Anilai, Cundinamarca.
I love this example. Ecocirco is brilliant because it challenges all our preconceived notions of what environmental education has to look like.
Right, because it integrates art, circus performance, and permaculture out in nature, which sounds wild.
It is wild.
But how exactly does that work? Like, how does juggling or acrobatics translate into a lesson on ecological transition?
Well, it really comes down to embodied learning.
Embodied learning. Okay.
Yeah. If you think about the physical requirements of a circus acrobatics requires an absolute fundamental trust in your partner.
Right, or somebody gets dropped.
Exactly. Juggling requires an intuitive understanding of flow and the management of multiple moving parts. Balancing acts require this acute awareness of your center of gravity and how it relates to your environment.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. EcoCirco uses this kinetic bodily intelligence as a physical metaphor for environmental balance. Instead of, sitting youth down with some dry textbook on ecosystem interdependence, they teach them the physical reality of interdependence through circus arts.
Wow.
And then they map those concepts directly onto permaculture and ecological stewardship.
That is wildly creative. It takes these heavy, often just overwhelming climate concepts and makes them physical, engaging, and deeply memorable.
It really does.
And here's where it gets really interesting. These localized projects, they are not operating in a vacuum. Like at Salonago, for example, the report mentions they hosted a group of students from Oberlin College, which is a university located in the United States.
Right, an international exchange.
Yeah, and during that visit, they held these massive discussions bridging local sustainability practices with global geopolitics and transition theory.
That intercultural exchange is such a vital function of these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
What locations like Solinagua, Villa Mejia, and EcoCirco represent, they're not just quirky places to live.
Right.
They're functioning as living, low-cost demonstration centers.
Demonstration centers, meaning their primary value is what? Proving to the outside world that this alternative is actually viable.
Correct. I mean, terms like a regenerative transformation or post-carbon economy are incredibly dense.
Yeah, they can sound a bit academic.
To a regional politician, or just an everyday citizen, they sound like pure academic jargon. But these eco-villages aren't just housing. They are 3D walk-in showrooms.
I love that phrase, walk-in showrooms.
It's true. When you can physically walk into a building made of rammed earth, drink water purified by a natural biofilter, and watch a community generate its own power, the theory becomes an undeniable reality.
Can't argue with it when you're standing in it.
Exactly. They prove that you don't need a billion-dollar technology grant to achieve a high quality of life. You can use low-cost, localized alternatives to address everyday needs.
But that brings us to, I think, the most difficult part of this entire deep dive.
The scaling problem.
Right. You have an eco-village proving the concept. You have a circus camp running flawlessly on permaculture. That is fantastic on a micro level.
Absolutely.
But the stated goal of Transition in Motion is systemic national change.
Yes.
So how do you cross that massive chasm from a DIY grassroots movement into the rigid institutional bureaucracy of national policy? Like, how did the tour actually interface with the government?
Well, that is the defining challenge of our era for these movements, and the tour organizers were highly, highly strategic about addressing it. They knew they couldn't just stay in the rural demonstration centers. Over the course of visiting those 25 territories, they intentionally built in meetings with heavy-hitting public institutions.
Yeah, the report highlights a formative meeting in Cali with Dajima. And just for context, if you're listening, Dajima is the primary environmental authority in that region. They are the bureaucrats who write the fines, grant the permits, dictate urban environmental policy.
Engaging with Dajme is a critical move. And it wasn't just them. They also held a workshop with officials representing 14 different municipalities of Gualiva at the GAFAR.
Right, the CAWR being the Regional Autonomous Corporation.
Yes, and the cars in Colombia wield immense power.
They really do.
They are the heavyweight gatekeepers for regional land use, water rights, environmental regulation.
So they basically hold the keys to the kingdom.
Pretty much. By bringing their methodologies directly to these municipal officials, the tour organizers were not just, protesting from the outside. They were trying to inject transition tools directly into the regional planning apparatus.
Which is so smart. And they also pushed to change the cultural narrative on a mass scale, too. Like, the report details how, on January 21st, the team went on national television.
Oh, yes.
They did a broadcast interview on the Telepacifico Channel's program, El Agora.
And that is how you reach the audiences that are never, ever going to attend a permaculture workshop or a neighborhood mediation.
Exactly. My grandma isn't going to Ecocirco, but she might watch Telepacifico.
Exactly. You have to normalize the concepts of transition and regeneration in the living rooms of the general public.
Yeah.
You cannot build a national movement if the nation doesn't even have the vocabulary to talk about it.
Right. So what does this all mean? Because despite all these successes, the TV spots, the government meetings, the international student exchanges, the final reflections in the official report offer a very, very sobering reality check.
They do.
This entire massive 2026 tour, with all its staggering logistical achievements, was essentially a labor of love.
Yeah.
The facilitating team funded this primarily out of their own pockets and through intense volunteer effort.
It's incredible, but also terrifying.
Right, because if they actually want to scale this, they can't just keep self-funding cross-country tours, they'd go bankrupt. So what has to happen next for this movement to survive its own success?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the report's strategic conclusion is incredibly clear-eyed about this vulnerability.
They know it's a problem.
Oh, they know.
Oh.
They have reached the absolute ceiling of what passion and volunteerism can achieve. To transition from these brilliant pilot programs to countrywide systemic transformation, they have to completely overhaul their operational model.
Okay, what does that new institutional model require?
It requires formal public-private community partnerships.
So, real contracts, real budgets.
Yes. It requires international cooperation and significant external funding. Because the skills required to build an off-grid bamboo structure are entirely different from the skills required to lobby a regional tax board or, write complex grant proposals and manage international funds.
That makes total sense. Being a great permaculturist doesn't make you a great lobbyist.
Exactly. The 2026 tour was a